All right. Hey, everybody, we've got Slava Rubin here today. And no introduction needed for Slava, but Slava Rubin is the co-founder of Indiegogo, as one of many companies as his and it's empowering a lot of people around the world. It's had over 500,000 campaigns, over $1 billion in distribution. And Slava represents crowdfunding and has helped the White House write many of the Jobs Acts, etc. as well. But that's not the only thing about Slava. Slava was also included in the Fortune 40 under 40, and he's still under 40, I think.
Just over, sadly. I'm now 41.
And he received the Wharton Young Leaders Award in 2015 and has a BSc from the Wharton School of Business. And he has a secret ambition of becoming a venture capitalist, which he's put in play for the last 3 years. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today as well. So Slava, welcome to a scenario where South Asia is listening to you all the way from somewhere in the US. And this today is hosted by three parties, Hatch, Hatch Sri Lanka. Hatch is the home of hungry entrepreneurs in Asia. We have over 500 entrepreneurs working in Hatch now. A vision was really formed many years ago to build a space that was the ecosystem for all things that were entrepreneurial. And Hatch began a couple of years ago, and we had the wonderful appearance of Slava last year to come and open Hatch. So Hatch is one of the hosts today. Seed Ventures, which is based in Pakistan, is a social entrepreneurship and equity development organization. It works to support and promote entrepreneurship across various landscapes and verticals, extensively in micro enterprises, small and medium enterprises, startups, universities, school children. Seed works in a very structured manner in developing the socio-economic landscape. And the third party today is BYLC Ventures, which was created to help passionate young founders get kickstarted their big ideas from BYLC education. They do this by providing technical support to validate product or solutions and seed funding to go faster to market, which is very relevant to the question today. And they also provide a set of acceleration support as well. While we're on this subject, Slava, good news is that Hatch is also going to be opening in Pakistan sometime this year, and that will be the first international expansion of Hatch.
Amazing.
Thank you for starting it. So welcome to this. First of all, thank you for accepting to come on here, and welcome to speaking to South Asia. I know it's morning for you and night for us. So how are things at the moment in New York?
Things are, I guess, as good as they can be. It's challenging for everybody in the world to navigate COVID. New York has obviously been one of the epicenters, so it's been a lot of challenges. People around my network, my wife's network, we definitely know folks with COVID, and sadly, we do know folks that have passed away as well. So it is tough times. That said, it's incredible to see everybody come together, whether it's New York, the US, or the world, to really, I think for the first time ever, have a unified challenge to go against. So I'm optimistic that we will figure this out. I don't think it's going to be a quick fix, but I do think we will get to the other side. So yeah.
I mean, when you were here last year, you stayed at the hotel that was bombed with the Easter bombing. So Sri Lanka's been through a bit of a hard time since you came here, but Hatch has become strong and continues to be growing at a pace. And we are very much growing in Sri Lanka as well as overseas. So things are slowing down, but I think you're right. There is always light at the end of the tunnel. Just to start off, if you can give a little bit of a background in terms of how you started and what was your experience in entrepreneurship before you started Indiegogo?
Sure. Just before I do that, I do want to mention, like you said, Nathan, I did have the opportunity to come for the opening of Hatch, which was an incredible experience. The people of Sri Lanka, it was incredible. The hospitality, and my family got to learn so much. Such a diverse culture, such a diverse nature, so many incredible people. It was very sad to, read and hear about the bombings, which actually happened very soon after I was there, in literally the same breakfast area in the same hotel, which was very scary. So we were very sad for the people of Sri Lanka. But as we see, you are persevering, and I just want to make sure that the people who are listening, if they're from Sri Lanka or otherwise, know that the Rubins, my last name is Rubin, we are big fans. So keep up the good work, and we're excited to keep seeing all the innovation. So with that aside, so thank you, Nathan, and everybody, for giving me an opportunity to do that when I came. And yeah, I mean, I was born in 1978 in Belarus. I was an immigrant to the United States. We lived in Brooklyn for 7 years, then moved to Pennsylvania. I then went to University of Pennsylvania for business school, and then I was a strategy consultant for 8 years. The whole time, though, since I was about 12 years old, I always had this entrepreneurial spirit. And what I mean by entrepreneurial spirit is trying to figure out answers to things that don't have answers, and trying to be creative in ways that I could get to solutions that I was just trying to get to myself. And that energy did not turn into becoming an actual entrepreneur till I was about 28 with Indiegogo. I was actually working in New York City as a strategy consultant, really just wanted to figure out how to have a positive impact on the world. Spoke with my two co-founders, Eric and Danae. Danae had the great idea in 2006, which is a long time ago now, to try to democratize access to funding. Really, finance was all about the gatekeeper, knowing the right banker, knowing the right person in government, knowing the right VC, and hoping that they would say yes and give you the stamp. And we just thought, in a world of YouTube and in a world of crowdsourcing starting to happen, maybe we could do that for finance as well, for money. So we created Indiegogo, we researched it, we built it, and in January 2008, we launched it. And I guess how the story goes, the rest is history. But now, as you mentioned, Indiegogo sends money all around the world. Those numbers you mentioned as part of my bio are actually quite dated, so which is totally perfect, because I'm proud to say that we now send billions around the world and have, done many, many, many more campaigns. So we actually even just finished a campaign a few days ago, which was related to COVID, because as soon as COVID started getting US attention, there was a professor in Columbia University in New York, who was creating innovations to figure out how to test people that aren't showing symptoms. So really, in the beginning, the talk was, hey, do you have symptoms? Are there enough tests to test you? And what he was saying very early, this Professor Lipkin, was saying very early, and now it's becoming more understood, I think, but there's a lot of people that are asymptomatic that are sharing COVID and spreading it. So we need as many people to test as possible, even if they feel totally fine. And so he raised a couple $1 million on Indiegogo to help push those tests forward, which is just awesome to see the entrepreneurial spirit and Indiegogo be able to be a part of that. So yeah.
And how do you think Indiegogo actually has changed the whole landscape? Because I think pre-Indiegogo, people were still doing a lot of angel investing. It was very local. It was very city-wise. And I think Indiegogo changed that whole atmosphere in the US.
Yeah. Keep in mind, this is now 2006, 2008 when we launched. It's very early in this whole tech concept. And the word crowdfunding actually didn't exist yet. So trying to have multiple people be able to give you small amounts of money, that concept really didn't exist, definitely not at scale. So it was really all about the gatekeeper. And you really just needed to have, like you said, the angel investor, that one person or that small group of people, which is like 3 people or a voting team of 5 or something, to say, Sam, Samantha, you're good enough or you're not good enough. And it's just fascinating that what YouTube was able to do, right? And YouTube was able to go around the TV stations, around the cable stations, and say, if you have some content and you want to put it up, put it up. Can't guarantee people are going to like it, Can't guarantee you're going to get a lot of eyeballs, but if you want to put it up, go for it. And they created this Darwinian effect where content that was good started to be shared and scaled and let other people see it. And content that was bad, not so many people saw it. Maybe your mother said you were doing a good job. And in finance, it was a game changer to really have another option. Instead of maxing out your credit card, instead of going to the bank and getting rejected many times, instead of having to take, very high interest loans that maybe you couldn't afford or just wasn't financially prudent, you had another way to see if people wanted to support you or not. And, it's great to see now that I think crowdfunding is a very normal concept. I don't even consider it very innovative anymore. It's almost like layered into the fabric of your options of how people think about raising money or how trying to go to market. So it's been fascinating to see the evolution. I don't think that evolution has actually ended yet. I think you're going to see further ability of the crowd to help influence how people are able to go to market, how they're able to raise money. And that's, that story is still being written. And it's great to see countries like Sri Lanka and others really adopting more of that capability because, if it's hard in the US, then it's hard in other places too. And some places it might be easier than the US, but the idea of access to capital is never going to be solved. We'll always need to figure out how to make that better because it's a little philosophical, but obviously we need food, we need water, we need shelter, we need our basics of life. But if you're able to control who gets money, it's really like a control on the people. So trying to open up that ability for anybody to try to get access, even small nuggets of money, I think is very powerful for society.
I mean, that's great. Thank you very much. I think you've done a great job for the entrepreneurial community globally by bringing the platform. So congratulations on that. One question, in 2007, 2008, when you started this, you were a startup yourself and you had the first crisis hit you straight on the nose in 2008. And how did that affect you? And what were the things that you went through as a startup at that point in that financial crisis of 2008?
It's interesting. I was just on a conference like this last week, and it was a fintech conference, a finance technology conference where people were talking about all kinds of new innovative things. And then they had a couple dinosaurs, and that's me referring to myself as old. They had a couple dinosaurs on a panel saying, how do you navigate a crisis? And all the other people that were presenting were young, they're in their 20s and 30s, or even in their 40s, but just didn't have to navigate during the 2008. And it was me and one other person. And they were saying like, hey, this COVID crisis is gonna be really hard to navigate. What can we learn from 2008? So it's fascinating that for 10 years, the last 10 years, it's been an upcycle, right? Things have been really incredible. So the ability to navigate crisis has been like, who cares? Everything's great. We don't need to know about what you know. So it's interesting that question has become a very relevant new topic that everybody wants to talk about. So we launched the company to the public in January 2008, and we had a 3-quarter plan. We actually had investors who wanted to invest in the company before we launched, while we were building, because they heard about it, but we rejected them because we wanted to have more power in the negotiation as part of having leverage of gone to market and already proven some traction. So our plan was in Q1 of 2008 to launch. Check, that happened. In Q2 of 2008 to get case studies and be able to prove that our product works. Check, that happened. And then in Q3, we're going to create a big media storm by getting PR and talking about our case studies, because investors like seeing the media, and use that to raise the money in Q3 2008. That was our brilliant plan. Now, people recall September 2008, which is Q3 2008, is when the market implodes. So our brilliant plan went straight out the window, and we were unable to raise. We had bootstrapped enough money between the 3 founders to last through the first 3 quarters of 2008. So now we just needed to come up with a whole new plan on the spot. We actually ended up going into our savings, into our retirement money, into our, any savings that we had. And we actually got rejected by 93 VCs in a row. We didn't get money for 3 years. So it was just through our own perseverance and our own naivete and our own unwillingness to give up that we kept moving forward. And you ask, how did you pay yourself? The answer is we didn't pay ourselves. We actually were paying to work. So we were just, subsidizing the costs of the, the servers and keeping the site up. We didn't pay ourselves. And we just felt like we were onto something and we kept on doing it. How were we able to navigate it? I would say that we were passionate. We believed in what we were doing and we weren't doing it for glory. The world of an entrepreneur is like a roller coaster, very high highs and very low lows. And you need to navigate that, because if you're not passionate, when you go down into the lows of the roller coaster, it's too easy to get off. You haven't become rich yet. You haven't become famous yet. You don't all of a sudden, have influence and power. So you're like, why am I doing this? Well, if you're doing it for those things, you're going to jump off the roller coaster at the bottom. But if you're doing it because you really want to have a positive impact, you feel like you could do something special, you feel like you and your partners are uniquely positioned to bring this unique thing to the world, then you'll stay on, like a crazy person, which is what an entrepreneur is. And that was one of the most important things, was the passion. We didn't have a lot of money. And because we didn't have a lot of money, we really didn't lose a lot of money in the process. Does that make sense? Which is, it was this weird thing that often people talk about entrepreneurs with how much cash they have in bank and how much runway they have left in months. But we had no cash in the bank and we had no runway. So it was just really every day we just decide, do we want to keep working or not? So there wasn't this like external funding thermometer that got to tell us if we should be working or not, which I believe was very helpful, because we just had our own decisions. And the last thing is, navigating crisis like that, there's only one way out, which is you have to make enough money to sustain yourself. Otherwise, you have to decide if you're going to shut down. So we really had to get rid of all the strategic projects, the extra ideas, and really focus on what exactly are we trying to do? How do we make our customers happy? And how do we get them to give us money? And that focus, that laser focus, we didn't really have any options except for that. Because if we didn't give ourselves some money, we were going to be forced to shut down. And yeah, that really helped us to become profitable while we were getting rejected by the VCs, which then, with the data and the conversions going up, the combination of becoming profitable and having the numbers go in the right direction made us that much more attractive for an investor to say yes. So the learnings for today, I think it's really important that you're doing it for the right reasons. Are you passionate? And really focusing on the core. Get rid of, any extra costs, get rid of any extra distractions. And I'm not talking about just money, I'm talking about energy and cycles, and focus on what exactly do you want your customers to say, I love that company because of this exact one thing.
That advice, what happened 10 years ago and your practical experience of it, nothing's really changed. Those are the simple things, you get back to basics. And that's what we've been sort of advising all of the companies we've been investing in, and are at Hatch as well, because one of the things that we're seeing is that a lot of the startups are suddenly never been through any of these crises because they're so new. So they're looking around for help, and people like Jeevan and myself have been helping them out. But it's good to hear that nothing has changed in the last 10 years, and you've got a practical experience of showing that.
Absolutely.
Question on COVID. You were talking about the products, the using the platform to do good, and I know you do a lot of good as well through using the platform. And I saw that there was a campaign recently as well that was topping up 3.5 million EGOT. It kills bacteria, microbes, and germs, etc. So, have you seen an increase in sort of a different type of products coming into Indiegogo at the moment?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is I think it's a little early. There's a little bit of a lag often because creating an Indiegogo campaign is not usually something that you do overnight. You want to be able to really be thoughtful. You want to think about how you want to go to market. You have to have the right team. So I do think you're going to see that continue to transition. I also think you'll see the same parallel effect in the entrepreneurial market of the things people are trying to solve. So really you see Indiegogo as a parallel to what the entrepreneurs are doing, usually on the innovative side, that will become mainstream usually about 24 months out. So what becomes mainstream 2 years from now is usually what's on Indiegogo today. We are seeing some early indicators of the changes of the campaigns. I would say we haven't seen a broad change yet, but I think we'll see more of that evolution in the months and really the years to come.
I mean, most people are sitting at home and they're in front of the screen every minute almost now. So isn't this a perfect time for a company to launch on Indiegogo? And have you seen that increase in launches, or have you seen a decrease in launches?
I would say we've seen both. Definitely when the crash happened right away at first, I think like many sites, except for maybe Amazon, I'm not sure, really saw a lot of decrease up front just because everybody got so nervous and so scared. I think you're starting to see more of that opening up because people are starting to think a little bit forward and lean forward as opposed to lean back and just hold back. So, we're not really in the personal cause business where it's like, hey, I lost my job today and now I need an extra $10,000 to cover my medical bills. So I think that market has probably seen an increase. But for innovation and entrepreneurialism, we definitely saw a decrease to start off with, and some of that is starting to come back.
I mean, around the world, you see many countries trying to support SMEs, the larger companies. Virgin Atlantic was the largest one at the moment that's going through crisis in the UK. Many have gone through. Delta got a 5.6 billion support from the government. Are the startups getting any support? And have you seen that come through the small business loans, SBA loans?
That's a great question. So I think it's a little hard for me to navigate because I don't have all the answers and I'm not exposed to all the data, but there is something in the United States called the CARES Act. And the CARES Act was recently passed about a month ago as part of all the stimulus that happened in the United States, like in many other countries, to try to, support the economy. There was so far something like $350 billion that was approved several weeks ago. And just recently, this week, actually, another $450 billion was approved. As part of that first $350 billion that was meant for small businesses, and by small business, I believe it's supposed to be less than 500 employees, is the threshold. That money has all been spoken for. And to my understanding, and I'm far from using the facts here, so please don't quote me, but not much of that has gone to the venture supported startup community. So, I definitely have heard of some companies that have received money. I've heard of many others that are in a wait and see situation. So I think that story is still evolving. Obviously, that's one of the reasons that the additional $400+ billion was passed, not specifically for the startups that are venture backed or investor backed. Obviously there's first the mom and pop bakery, the nail salon, all the various types of organizations that keep America running locally. Those folks definitely are probably getting the money first. I'm guessing. I don't really know exactly. But yeah, there's, I think, going to be still a lot of questions as to who's getting the money and is everybody who's supposed to get the money, have they gotten it? And that's a very evolving story right now.
We've got so many people watching from Pakistan, Bangladesh. So anyone coming in, joining in now, please just put your name in the comments box and on Facebook, just type who you are and where you're from. And if you've got any questions, please do share them as well. One of the things that's happened in this part of the world, and I'm not sure how it is in the US, is that we're seeing that collateral is one of the biggest hurdles for startups in this part of the world. And that's being said, most of the countries around the world in that startup community have gone past that collateral investment. So most of the loans that are being offered by governments their people are asking for collateral. What's your view on governments asking for collateral for startups?
When you say asking for collateral, you mean in this specific COVID situation or independent of that?
I think it's just independent, but in this particular COVID situation, they're even asking for collateral at this stage from companies that have no asset base, as you know.
I am not a government expert, so please take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I think right now, during the COVID crisis, I would say demanding collateral is a step too far, especially for very small companies. If your whole goal is to support that kind of early stage mom and pop local small businesses, I think trying to have those sorts of thresholds will really limit the support you can provide. Obviously, there needs to be exceptions and there needs to be frameworks that are navigated. So I don't think we're going to create the rules right now. As it relates to on a day-to-day level, without a crisis in place, I think that I can see the need for having a sustainable system and not just handing out money that burns and no one is held accountable and there's nothing to do with it at all. So that doesn't mean that government shouldn't figure out how to support their small businesses. I think they should. I just think that in a COVID situation versus non-COVID situation, probably there are different rules that should be at play.
So just moving on to Humbition, I mean, you've got a dozen odd companies that you invested in. It's an early stage fund, and it's based in New York. So it must be troubling times for all of these startups. How have you been helping? How have the startups been sort of helping each other as well through this process? And is there any advice that you give in terms of the current climate on what early stage companies and even impact stage companies should be doing?
Sure. So yeah, we now have 12 investments. The fund is called Humbition. So it's the word humble and ambition put together. Those are two of our favorite qualities in entrepreneurs. And all the investments happen at the seed or A stage. Some of them have gone on to grow beyond that already. Of the 12 companies, 11 are US based, one is Canadian. And we invest mostly into marketplaces, health tech, or what we call frontier tech, which is the more innovative technologies. That's a majority of our investments. Over half of our investments are actually New York based, and the rest are outside of New York. I would say that one company in the portfolio is doing very well because of the market. And that's a little bit obvious because it's in the health tech telemedicine space. One of our companies is having significant challenges. It really focuses on the hospitality industry, and the hospitality industry in the US, for all intents and purposes, is at a standstill, and there's nothing to be done there right now. And the other 10, I would say, have had a small impact, positive or negative, and they're just trying to navigate it like any other company. So it's not one of those huge negatives or huge positives. So it's kind of like a traditional bell curve where you see a couple outliers on both sides, one outlier on both sides, and then the rest are kind of in that core 95%. We've been working with all of them, and I've been personally working with all of them literally to navigate these times. And one of the first things that I try to bring to the table, and that's what we offer as investors, is our operator experience. And right away, I'm like, listen, I literally went through this. Like these are things you need to think about. And some of them obviously have not gone through these situations, so they appreciate the guidance. So everybody has had to think about how to slow down hiring, lower costs, make tough decisions. Sometimes that means having to let people go, sadly. And again, to really remove the distractions out of the product cycle, out of the marketing cycle, out of the innovation cycle, and really focus on the core. What do we want our business to be known for? Try to make sure if there is an opportunity to raise some capital now in these really tough times, to try to raise it as quickly as possible, maybe not even on the best terms, and to really try to extend the runway because especially 4 weeks ago, and I'm not saying it's that much, cushier now, but highly uncertain where this market was going 4 weeks ago, still highly uncertain where this market is going. So it's hard to know when will be that opportunity to really be able to raise investment again properly. Is it going to happen in May? Is it going to happen in November? Is it not going to happen until November next year? So in a world of uncertainty, you just got to give yourself as much of a lifeline as possible to keep focusing on the core and making customers happy. And we've also, we've also been working with them through the government programs, helping to navigate the government programs, supporting them whenever possible, whether it be connecting them to the right people through our contacts, legal help, accounting help, et cetera, et cetera.
And if you were raising money, should you worry about valuation at this moment, or should you just be raising any amount of money that you can?
My opinion, again, I'm a sample set of one, is if you are able to close money today, you should close it.
Right.
Unless the money comes with literally a contract with the devil, then I think you are already ahead of 95% of the market, which is unable to even have the option of closing money. Nevertheless, the option of closing money on bad terms. You with me? So 95% do not even have that option. And that might be a low percentage. Maybe it's 99. I'm really not sure. So if you have an opportunity to raise money, I definitely suggest you close it. I have had many conversations in the last 4 weeks with entrepreneurs I know who have tried to navigate that exact conversation with me. I'm going to use some hypothetical numbers right now, so it doesn't really matter. But, I thought I was going to get a $10 million valuation, and now they're talking to me about a $6 million valuation. I thought I was going to give away 10% of the company, and now it looks like I'm going to give away 20+% of the company. I'm just making that up. I don't think I'm going to do it. What do you think? And I give them the same feedback, which is, having the opportunity to close the money right now is a gift. And if you can sustain yourself without closing the money, then great, don't close the money. But if you really, need some money, I wouldn't try to over negotiate it right now because it might be gone tomorrow, especially in this highly dynamic market, which is, things look good. And then all of a sudden, oil goes down the drain, and that impacts a bunch of people in terms of what they thought they had more wealth. Then all of a sudden there's a lot of shoes still to drop, a lot of ripple effects that we still are not ready for. And those ripple effects will have impacts on people who you thought they were going to give you money yesterday. All of a sudden they might be like, whoa, this just changed my whole philosophy or my whole approach. So I would be less in a negotiating position right now.
And interesting questions come up from Shehan Adhikari. Shehan's asking, what sort of KPIs should startup focus on during the COVID situation? And if they were to continue thriving, what are the KPIs that they should be monitoring as a business?
The COVID situation doesn't change your business. What it does is it just changes the speed at which you can execute your business, or the demand for your product. For some folks, the demand will go up because of COVID, and for some folks, the demand will go down. That said, you really need to decide what are the 2 or 3 KPIs that your company is really focused on. Obviously, there's the really generic ones, like for a SaaS business, software as a service business, it's like your ARR, your recurring revenues. If it's a marketplace, it's your gross dollar volume that's going through your marketplace. What's your transaction value? What's your revenue? What's your expenses? What's your burn? How many customers? What's your retention? What's your customer acquisition cost? What's your LTV, your lifetime value? It's hard to do some broad stroke COVID changes that these are what they should be. It's still your company's KPIs. I say limit it to 3 or less, and do as well as you can against those KPIs.
A couple of more regional questions. Mahbub and Nizar from Sri Lanka, and Mahbub from Dhaka in Bangladesh. There are a lot of restrictions in this part of the world in terms of sending money out, receiving money, etc. as well. So can crowdfunding really be a viable option to raise money, and would Indiegogo be a good platform for them to use? I mean, we've got so many examples of people using it globally, but this is specific to these two countries.
Yeah, I mean, you probably are better than me, Nathan, in answering that. I mean, the short answer is Indiegogo is global, and we try to support as much as possible. I do know that there are some challenges with some banks and some PayPal restrictions and some, Stripe restrictions and some payment restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, my understanding is that we're supporting those countries. But Nathan, what's your point of view on trying to run a crowdfunding campaign? Plus, there's also local platforms as well. So I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I mean, in Sri Lanka, sending money out is an issue. So it is a problem in sending money out, but receiving money in is not a problem. So you can reasonably start off a campaign in the US on Indiegogo as well, or anywhere else. I think there are many local platforms that are available. Hatch is working on one with a company called Crowdisland, and Crowdisland is hoping to, during this COVID situation, help put the funders on one side and the entrepreneurs on the other side and help match funding. So that's a very different type of crowdfunding exercise. But overall, I think there is options for people around this region, specifically using Indiegogo is one of the options that is there. So I think there is ways around it, and you just have to be a little bit smarter. And maybe if you need any help, you can contact the guys at Hatch or guys at BYLC or Seed, and they'll definitely help you out in finding a way. We think that crowdfunding is a big need in this part of the world, and tying on to that question, how can we sort of engage like a local Indiegogo in South Asia? Is that in the thoughts of Indiegogo at all? I know it's a global website, but to get around some of these hurdles of these governments, have you ever thought through of setting up countrywide Indiegogos instead?
Yeah, great question. Definitely something that we have navigated over the years. What we have found is having a really strong central core is really important. There's definitely benefit often from a campaign engagement. So knowing the folks who want to try to start a campaign and helping them and supporting them, there's definitely benefits to having some, I call it boots on the ground. So having some folks local. We actually have a strong contingent in China of that as an example, because China is actually our strongest market besides the US. And so I think in a perfect world where Indiegogo was flush with cash and we weren't trying to be sustainable, I would say there would be people in every single country of the world as ambassadors looking to advance the startup communities in that country and help them understand how to use Indiegogo. In a world of COVID or just being sustainable on a day-to-day level, we're just not there in terms of our spend and in terms of the return. So yeah, I would love for that to happen though.
I mean, there's different forms. I mean, one of the other views of equity-based crowdfunding, and I know it's legal in the US, it's not in the emerging markets. What's your view? How successful has equity-based funding been?
Equity-based funding in the US started in 2016. In several other countries started a little bit before that. I would say at the macro level, it looks like it's failed because it's been pretty small, but I disagree with that. I think that it's something so new in the grand scheme of things that 10 years ago, if you said, hey, we're going to have equity-based crowdfunding in the world, in any country, most people would just laugh at you, literally laugh at you. So the fact that we've gone from people just laughing at you, it's regulatory not allowed, to now it's allowed, and you're seeing some small results, I think is great. I think that's totally great. You're already seeing some of the regulations get a little bit eased and lifted, some of the numbers getting bigger in the US. The UK is doing a great job. There's other countries that are doing a good job. I think this story is still unfolding as well. I think 15 years from now, 20 years after it opened up, I think it's become a very normal established thing. It's hard to wait another 15 years, but you got to appreciate the finance world doesn't turn on a dime. Things take time. PayPal, I think, has been around since like 99 as X.com or something like that. We're talking 21 years later or even longer. So things take time to really evolve. So I'm still bullish. And I don't actually think the small impacts are a problem. I just think that should have been expected to start off with.
Just let's question a little bit as well. If you look at crowdfunding and looking at things like cryptocurrencies, I know you had a bet on ICOs as well. And how did that go, and what were your learnings from that?
Right. So I think that cryptocurrencies has been interesting. We actually never bet specifically on the ICOs, but rather more like security tokens and trying to navigate how to do ICOs in a regulatory compliant way. The idea of skirting around the government and using loopholes to not have to follow through on accounting rules, et cetera, those days have ended. A lot of that has been fraudulent, and a lot of that has been kind of a hype cycle. So that would be what classic ICOs are. In terms of the security tokens and looking how to navigate the blockchain and trying to allow for creating of a currency out of creating units or shares on the blockchain of a decentralized element. I think we're early. I think it's still possible. I actually was part of bringing one of the most blue chip assets to market under a security token, which is the St. Regis Hotel in Aspen, Colorado. That's a real building that has real hotel rooms that, if it wasn't for COVID, really charges, like $1,000 a night. So that had a real value as an asset, $200 million plus. They carved out a small piece of that asset and sold it off as fragments, as small shares, which were done on the blockchain. So I wouldn't call that an ICO, but some people call it ICO. It really was a security token offering. So it was just like a different version of shares, but instead it was on the blockchain to make transactional costs easier. Again, still very early to make that. Typically, the way something like the Aspen St. Regis will work is you're not cutting that $200 million plus asset into thousands of pieces. It's really being sold from like one entity or one person to another, or maybe from like one person to 5 people or something like that, like a buying group. The idea was to try to give access to more people. And the challenge with that is really then to create the liquidity market. So it's one thing to give them the shares and say, here you go, here's your $10,000 worth of that building, which is cool. You want to sell your $10,000 worth for $11,000. But there needs to be a market on which to trade that. So there's not a lot of liquid markets right now for security tokens. So I think that would need to be the next block of infrastructure that is built. I think we're probably several years away from that becoming normal, but there are people working on it.
There's a question here from a gentleman from Sri Lanka, Janaka Ranasinghe. He's saying, what is your advice for anyone who has taken pre-orders, spent the money, but are unable to deliver due to the supply chain or logistics issue during COVID? How best to navigate this situation? I know that Indiegogo, you have a lot of the launches and campaigns that are delayed due to various technical difficulties. So you probably have some experience and advice that you can give during this COVID situation as well.
Yeah, I mean, the logistics situation is challenging. There's no silver, playbook. There's no one playbook as to how to navigate it. I would say the key is to try to stay as nimble as possible, keep your costs as low as possible, maybe not have all your eggs in one basket with one manufacturer or one supply chain partner. I wish I had the perfect answers of how to navigate it, but really, if you had 10 campaigns on Indiegogo looking to navigate it, they're probably navigating in 10 different creative ways. But it's important to not, in software, there really is this concept of being nimble of how you develop. And I think it's important to try to be as nimble as possible with the supply chain stuff as well.
Here's a question from our partners in Pakistan, Nazar and Asha. In terms of using in this COVID situation, how can people use crowdfunding and how can they use Indiegogo as a platform even to be able to sort of get short-term wins as such. As you suggested earlier, it is not a immediate thing where you can put things online and try and get some money for it. So obviously there's some planning, etc. But during COVID itself, do you feel that there are options for them to really put product on online and crowdfund it?
Well, to be clear, putting up a campaign you can do in a matter of minutes or an hour. I'm just talking about having a thoughtful campaign, one that you really have thought about how you're going to market, who you're going to market to, and what are going to be the messages, how you're going to share, who's going to work on it, how much money you're going to spend, et cetera, et cetera. So I think if you have an innovative entrepreneurial idea, or any entrepreneurial idea really, and you want to try to raise money from the crowd, then Indiegogo is a great place to come. If you just throw it up and say, hey, I put up a campaign, where's the money? You might get disappointed, because people aren't just like trolling through Indiegogo looking for an opportunity to just like give some campaign that they don't understand money. So you really need to be thoughtful about how you're going to market it and go to market. And you could have some great results. Like you mentioned, some of our campaigns are still right now raising millions.
This is the $1 million question. Everyone's asking you, what are the industries that you think post-COVID will really do well in the short term and in the long term? And what are those companies or sectors that you feel are going to be really strong coming out of COVID?
You know, I don't have a crystal ball, but the things that I'm seeing in no particular order is there's definitely, in my mind, a change for at least the next 10 years, if not longer, around how people are going to navigate health and how we're going to navigate public health and what systems need to be in place so that we can mitigate the economic impact COVID has had on the world. So I do foresee there being new health tech companies that come out. There's the obvious ones related to COVID specifically, right? Trying to solve that and come to solutions. But I'm talking about more preventing the next one, figuring out how to mitigate the new bubbles that will pop up. And an example of that would be there's a company in the US called Clear. So Clear helps you try to get through security lines at the airport. But instead of having to wait like everybody else in lines that are much longer, if you pay for a Clear membership, it uses biometrics and security clearance from before. So it'll look at your fingerprints, scan your eye, and it'll know that much quicker that you are who you are and that you deserve to go through the line very quickly. And comparing that Clear concept versus just the regular lines, which could take, minutes, 10 minutes, an hour to get through, Clear is a fascinating product. And I do foresee kind of a Clear for Health ID popping up in the world, whether it's country by country, whether it's a global solution, whether it's government supported, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be hard to open up a restaurant or the movie theater if you don't know if you're going to get customers. And you don't know if you're going to get customers because the customers might be nervous to sit next to other people who you don't know if they have it or not, right? Or if they're not healthy or not, even post-COVID. So I foresee a solution that comes out where people will just have to scan their QR code or scan their phones, which are already connected to the laboratory tests or the home tests that show that you're green light, right? As opposed to red light. And before you can go to the movie theater, you have to prove that you're green light, prove you are who you are, and probably you're scanning your temperature right there in the moment to, have another verification. So that's just like an example of an interesting company that I think will come out. Who will do that? I'm not sure if anybody has the infrastructure today to just pivot towards that, or if it'll be a brand new company. But that's just one example. But I think there'll be many more health tech oriented companies that will come out. So I think that's a very, very wide open space. I think that we're really learning that remote work is not as bad as it was thought of originally, There's really advancements that are happening there, but people are also probably identifying that there are gaps and there are improvements that can be made. So I think that remote work and remote productivity will continue to improve. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there. I think that in the US, and I don't know if this is going to happen across the globe, but there's a little bit more movement away from the urban central area and a little bit more trying to get a little bit of space and getting a little bit more out of the middle of downtown. So what will that impact on the potential companies that should come out? I also think online education, which, you know, what we're doing right now is arguable online education. There's an argument for really building out that infrastructure as well. I think that the hospitals have had to navigate challenges. There's been a lot of need for innovation there. So I wouldn't be surprised if, again, under the health tech category, there's a lot of great entrepreneurial endeavors that happen. So, I mean, those are just some of my ideas off the top of my head. But really, any entrepreneur that feels passionate about solving a problem that they feel the world needs to have solved, they should go for it.
So I know we've got about 5 minutes left with you. So a couple of questions around transparency. You know, just to echo what you said, I think we all agree that there's going to be much more, much reduced privacy in certain health data, which was a big topic before this. And governments will probably start monitoring a little bit more as well. You've already seen that in places like Dubai and Singapore, and China, where the governments are using cameras and also phone data to be monitoring you. But how important is transparency in product that's going to be sold on Indiegogo in the future, i.e. where it's made, who it's made by, how it traveled, etc.? How important is that going to be?
I think it's really important. I think on the internet, what people hate is a scam. What people hate is lies. They really like you being authentic, even if they don't agree with you. If you're trying to cover something up, you're bound to be uncovered, which is going to be a really big problem. If you say it's being made in Sri Lanka, but it's really being made somewhere else, and somebody writes that in a post or a blog or a tweet, and then everybody figures that out, I think you're in big trouble. So I think it's important that you are as honest and authentic as possible. The key is not to make everybody happy, but rather just be true. So I do think transparency is critical, whether on Indiegogo or in a lot of things.
So final question to you. With regards, you're wearing two hats. One is on a crowdfunding side and the other side is a VC. And to entrepreneurs out there, what's the difference between going to a VC and getting money, and what's the difference between going to a crowdfunding side and trying to raise money? What would you advise companies to do both, or do one first before going to the other?
Totally depends on your business, on what should be the right order. But if you're trying to create a interesting, innovative product, then for sure Indiegogo can be a great support mechanism for you. If you're trying to create some SaaS business, which is pure software selling to large enterprises, I don't know that Indiegogo is going to be your best outlet to try to validate your product or to raise money. I think that the idea of what helps to make a great result are similar. You know, you want to prove that you have metrics, that you have traction, you have a great team, that you could tell the story. But how you go about it is definitely very different. Trying to pitch an investor to raise $1 million is very different than trying to raise $1 million on Indiegogo through the tactical measures of actually creating the video, creating the copy, creating the perks, actually getting the landing page, capturing the email addresses, going to market with your marketing. All of those things, if you nail it right, are going to be super helpful for you raising the $1 million from the investor. So there's a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. It shouldn't be either or. There's a lot of opportunities to do both. And depending on where you are in your life cycle, you might want to raise a little bit of investor money before you do the Indiegogo, or you might want to do the Indiegogo before you raise any investor money. I think it's very specific to your situation and your product.
So before I thank Slava and at the end of the session, just wanted to thank Seed from Pakistan, Faraz and his team, BYLC Ventures, Ejad and his team, and Hatch Global, Nazar and Jeevan out at Hatch and Rondala and Brinda. Thank you for helping set this up. Slava, as usual, it's been really entertaining. Thank you for being very open and sharing. And Slava's a great friend of mine and is someone who I ping quite a bit to ask ideas. He's a great friend of this region. So we look forward to having you back here once the planes are flying and the hotels are open again. One other thing, Hatch today launched its FinTech accelerators virtually, which was the first time a virtual accelerator is being launched in this region. So
amazing.
Lots of different things happening due to COVID. So thanks, Slava, again, and have a great day in US.
Great. Thanks, Nathan, for having me and being awesome as a moderator.
Thank you. Bye-bye.